Hello and welcome back to Season 3 of the Edupulse podcast. Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Edupulse podcast. My name is Chris and I'm here with Adam. Adam, how are you?
I'm good. Today's the last day of term for me, so it's been a slog, but we're there.
Well, the respect to you, but I might ask for a tiny little bit more respect because at my school we are still going. We're going to the 30th of July, but that is for reasons I've already spoken about. But I tell you, it's tough at this end of the term. Somebody who's having maybe some feet up time, well-deserved feet up time, is our very, very special guest, Frida Arthur Boakye. Welcome to the podcast, all the way from Ghana, Frida.
Hi, I am so excited to be joining from here. The sun's been sunning and I've been drinking some coconut water and I'm having a great time. I do not envy either of you. I'm so glad that I'm done.
And that's lucky because we don't hate you at all for being where you are. Frida, it's an absolute joy to have you on. Just to let all the listeners know, I personally met you when we did our talk at the Festival of Education a couple of weeks ago, and you were kind enough to join mine and Adam's panel with the Church of England Strand, and we were talking about teacher efficacy, and we were just blown away by your passion and commitment to your own career and to professional development. So for those people out there who are living under a bit of a rock and they don't know who you are, do you want to just tell our audience who you are and a little bit of where you've come from?
Yes, of course. So I think the best way to understand the context of who I am and why I am where I am is to go all the way back. So I was born in France and grew up there up until I was 11 years old. But my family are originally from Ghana. And then I started secondary school in the UK, speaking no English at all, like none whatsoever. But
Wow.
honestly, just had the best teachers who got me up to speed really, really quickly, and got me to the point where I aced all of my GCSEs, did really, really well at A levels, went to UCL, and then just kind of got stuck there because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in my future. And then I went back to my head teacher, my secondary head teacher, and she said to me, "You know what, Frida, you've been a teacher's pet your whole life, for as long as I've known you, and you're like super bossy, and you were always the one who was organizing study groups and revision groups and wanting to mentor some of the younger students. And so I think you should do teach first." And I said to her, "I can never be a teacher.
Wow.
I don't have the patience for it. I don't know if I can, if I can be around children all the time." And she said, "Just have a go and let me know." And she was completely right because I fell in love with teaching the moment I stepped into the classroom. Um, and it just kind of felt like full circle, I'm now helping students the same way that my teachers helped me to get to where I am. And so I really, really believe in the power of the classroom space and how much can be achieved in that space. And so the rest of my career has really been about how do we make sure that every single teacher feels very capable to navigate the mess that the classroom can sometimes be, and how to make the right decisions for the students, but also for themselves, so that they can feel empowered and grow and feel really effective in that capacity. And that's brought me lots of satisfaction, and I'm still on that road um, of trying to make teachers the best version of themselves. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
And you've just started at a new school as vice principal, which is
Yes.
exceptionally exciting. So how long have you been teaching for?
I've been teaching for 7 academic years. So I'm going to start my 8th in September.
And now you see, Adam and I, people can't see it at home, but we're going to be clapping and applauding and raising our hands because that's a phenomenal achievement. Can I ask how you initially deal with some of the skepticism that people will automatically go, 7 years, that's not enough time. I've been a middle leader for 15,000 years and I'm still nowhere near that.
Yeah.
Who on earth do you think you are? How do you deal with that?
I think one, it's really important to acknowledge that, and I actually heard this really recently, is that years don't necessarily mean that someone is an expert, and I'm not saying that I am an
Mm,
expert at all,
mhm.
but what I do mean to say is that I think expertise comes with like really studying your craft and like really being super critical about yourself, about what you see around you, about the stuff that you hear, the stuff that you read. And I think that that's one thing that I've really done is been hypercritical of myself as a teacher. And so even till now, I will still record bits of my lessons and like watch, rewatch, and redraft and like really think about my explanations or how I checked that bit of information. And I think when you're very reflective, it's really easy for you to make progress very quickly. And I think that, in
Yeah.
terms of academic outcomes, my students have made super like amazing progress, and also just collaboratively as well, working with some of my colleagues and being able to see with each other how much we're supporting one another. One of my favorite sayings is iron sharpens iron, and this idea that like you can't do it by yourself, you can't get better by yourself, and so really leaning on other people is really useful. And I think, yeah, initially people are skeptical, but once you show them what you're up to, show them the effect of it, and even give them one little bit of feedback, sorry, and they implement it and they see, how much of a difference it makes. People immediately just start saying, it actually doesn't really matter that you've only done 7 years in the classroom. Um, I wanna work with you. I want to work alongside you, and I think that's really important. That it is about working together and not just being told what to do from someone else.
I think that's like it's so interesting as well that what you say about experience and
Mhm.
expertise, because there is this assumption that experience means number of years in the job, and
Right.
actually, like if you've done the same year 20 times, I don't think that's experience.
I love that. That
I
is
think it's
so
just
so true.
it and there are so and that's fine if people, if people that do that, that's
Mhm.
absolutely fine if that's what you want to do, and I think you could then say that you have like genuine expertise in that thing that you've been doing for
Correct.
20 years, because it's,
Yeah.
we know expertise is so domain specific. But I think
Mhm.
that what you've done, and from having like spoken to you about your career trajectory to this point, it's almost been a little bit like a snowball, where like you've done the first thing and then the snowball's kept rolling, so you've kept the first thing and taken on the next thing,
Yeah.
and then kept the first two going and then taken on the third thing, and ultimately you've been able to keep that snowball together while you've been picking up more snow, i.e. more different experiences.
Mhm.
And so therefore now your snowball is as big after 7 years as what it is for other people after 20. And that's absolutely fine for the 7 year teacher and for the 20 year teacher. But
Agreed.
we shouldn't we shouldn't be kind of saying, well, your snowball got built too fast, therefore it can't possibly be stable. Like, it is, as long as you've had the right breadth of experience and the right
Mhm.
guidance along the way.
Mhm.
So I think it's really inspirational what you've done.
Thank you. And like 1,000%, just off of what you said, I do think sometimes, especially as teachers, we can grow very attached to one area of our career. So, you know, I and there's nothing wrong with it. You'll get a maths teacher who says absolutely outside of maths, like he's not doing anything else or she's not doing anything else outside of maths. And I think one of the things that's helped me to grow really quickly is that I haven't set up those limitations on myself. So I qualified as an English teacher, um, but like did a whole year of teaching phonics to students who um, don't speak English. And then in the last 3 years, I've gone full time teaching MFL. And then just in my various roles, I've done like PSHE, I've done personal development and careers, I've done trips and enrichment, teaching and learning. I've literally done like a pastoral and like year 11 outcomes. Um, so I think all of those different things means that I've understood, quite a big um, chunk of what education is right now, and what the reality is on the ground. But equally as well, really thought about what are the commonalities between all of these different areas, and therefore what's applicable to every single teacher, regardless of what subject they're teaching or how far along they are in their career. What are those common things that can be really beneficial to every teacher? And that has absolutely come from being open to trying different things, in every single domain possible at school. So
I
yeah.
think it's fascinating because we try and link a little bit of academic work in where we can. I think it
Mhm.
was Berliner back in the early 2000s who was talking about experience not equaling expertise,
Mhm.
because experts are able to recognize patterns more quickly because they're in lots of different spaces, that your judgment, your intuitive judgment is honed by experience, and you become more flexible and more adaptive because your expertise is stemming from your deliberate practice. And that's what you opened
Right.
with. You went,
Mhm.
I am doing
Yeah,
this on
that's
purpose.
right.
I am making myself an expert. And you've been
Mhm.
able to do that within the 7 years. Because it's not about years, it's about depth of learning, it's about reflection and that deliberate practice. What do you think defines your daily work when it comes to certainly the work Adam's doing with Sarah and Hailey at the moment on adaptive expertise? Because
Mhm.
that, for me, that is what you're going to be showing. If you are not if you are where you are in 7 years, because you are going to be highly skilled in that adaptive expertise. What do you think you're doing on a daily basis that is helping you propel yourself in that direction?
Mm. Really good question. I would say I think um like checking in with other people. Um and I think we talked a bit about this at the education festival of education, sorry, and talked about this idea that the reason why teachers are hired in the first place is because they do have really solid knowledge on whatever area it is that they're teaching. And I think one thing that I absolutely love is doing drop-ins on different teachers, because the more teachers you see teaching, the more you pick up on tiny little things, whether it is the way that they corrected a specific student. And I think in the early years of my career, one of the things that really helped me was going in to see the students that maybe I found a bit tricky or challenging or couldn't quite read well, seeing them in different teachers' classrooms and seeing how every teacher interacts with that specific student and how it goes for them. So if they're successful or if they're not, what was it that worked, what didn't, and then bringing that knowledge back into my own classroom. And so I would definitely say on a day to day, like doing drop ins is such a key part of my day, of trying to go and see as many different people as possible for that reason. But oh, sorry, do you want to jump in, Adam? Go on.
Yeah, only because like what you're describing is like it's gold, because and it links so clearly to what Chris was saying previously
Mhm.
about expertise and how expertise develops. And there's a difference between deliberate practice and naive practice. So like
Mm.
naive practice is like, and the example. So Frida and I met on the Step Lab certificate in coaching leadership. Big big encouragement to anybody who wants to do a great PD course. That's the one for you.
100%.
Um, but like the example that we had on that course actually was like when you're playing tennis, if you just rock up and play tennis every week, that's naive practice. Like you'll get a bit better by virtue of the fact that you are engaging that activity. But if you rock up each week and you go, I'm going to specifically work on my forehand,
Exactly.
then you will get better faster. What you're describing is I've got this problem with these particular students. I'm
Mhm.
going to deliberately go and find out how other teachers deal with those students, and then I'm going to deliberately bring that practice back into my own practice. So you're not walking in to a classroom to do a drop in and go, I'm going to go and watch a teacher. You're
Yeah.
going in going, I want to see how that teacher does this thing with these students in this context at this time, and I'm going to tease out what commonalities there are between what they're doing and what I'm doing, and I'm then going to change my practice in that very deliberate way. It's so, and I think that's such an important, the reason I wanted to jump in was like it's
Yeah.
such an important difference for people to get, is like, and I hear it all the time with people going, oh, we're going to go and visit this school, and going, what are you looking for in that school then?
Agreed.
Oh, it's going to go and see what it's all about and stuff.
Mhm.
Like, no, go into a room specifically to find something out, and then go and find that thing. What you're describing there, and you've obviously just done that intuitively earlier on in your career as well. But
Yeah.
what you're describing is that really rich, deliberate practice where you're going after that one tiny little improvement. There's a big difference between that and just going and watching a ton of teaching. So yeah,
I
well done.
100% agree. And I love the fact that you've brought up the tennis analogy as well, because
Mm.
I'm really big on sports docu-series, and like Netflix has a ton of them. And
Mm.
in every single one that I've watched, whether it's basketball or football or tennis or golf. Recently I watched one about golf. They all have a coach. They all have a coach. Like,
Yeah.
there's no one that doesn't have a coach who's playing at an elite level. And recently I've been thinking a lot about the fact that, and I love all of the sports stuff, but no one has as important a job, I think, as teachers and maybe doctors. Okay. But like,
Mm.
no one's job is as important as ours, because no, everything that we do in the classroom has such a massive impact in that student's life, one way or another. And so, in my mind, if a tennis player or if an NFL player is investing in a coach and investing a lot of time in getting better at every single aspect of their game, shouldn't we as teachers be putting in just as much thought and effort in making sure that every single area of our practice is so excellent that we can maximize how much of an impact we can have on our students? And so, absolutely, making that time to go and see even one other teacher once a week, if that's all a teacher can manage, because I do understand that timetable constraints are very real as well, and that teachers have lots to do. But really setting aside that time to go and see someone else, for me, that was like a game changer in the early part of my career. And it's still something that I very much enjoy doing. And sure, nowadays, when I go into a classroom, um, you know, from the perspective of leading, teaching, and learning, I am looking for slightly different things, and I'm trying to find, the common areas that as a school we can work on to push forwards. But I'm also very much still in those classrooms, picking up nuggets from every teacher that I see, with the idea of, I'm going to try this in my classroom and see how it goes. Because I don't also, one thing that I also don't believe is that, if you ever reach quote unquote expert level, that you now know everything and you don't need to learn from anyone. Like, that is just not true. And that's not something that I believe in. Certainly, even an ITT teacher, I always say you can go in there and there might be one little thing that you think, oh, that's quite interesting that you've done it this way. I'm going to go into my classroom and I'm going to try it too. And so, yeah, so I would definitely say that that was the biggest game changer for me, was looking at other people's practice and really
So,
searching for it.
talk to us a bit more about coaching, because like that's obviously your role or is your role certainly in your
Yeah.
last school, and I think also in this one as well.
hmm
This idea around leading professional development, and specifically this interest in coaching.
hmm
Just talk to us a little bit about like how you came to that kind of role, and like what your personal beliefs are about what makes good coaching in schools.
Yeah. So I think, one, I was really fortunate to end up at a school called AIM North London, which is a school that I've been at for the last 5 years. That is a school that really, really believes in coaching and in its power. And so that was our main form of PD at that school. Josh Goodrich, who is founder and CEO of Step Lab, was for a year leading on teaching and learning at the school. And so he
Mm.
launched coaching there. And he started with a small group of us, which I was fortunate to be a part of. And
Mm.
he trained us essentially to be coaches. And then we started coaching other people in the school. And then eventually we moved into a reciprocal coaching model, which meant that every single teacher was a coach and every single teacher was a coachee, which I think has lots of merit, in the sense that, if again, it echoes the message that I've just said, which is every single teacher has something to bring to the table and has something that they can, um, you know, impact on other people with. So the fact that we were doing reciprocal coaching was really strong, in the sense that it meant that people could own the best bits of their practice and like help each other to grow. Um, and so once Josh left that role, um, as- I basically just carried it on and have done ever since, leading with the coaching aspect of things. And now in my role as vice principal at this new school, I am now setting up coaching from scratch, which is really exciting because I've seen its power and I've seen how impactful it can be. And so now, like, starting from ground zero again in a new school, and trying to make sure
Mhm.
that I am being adaptive to the needs of this school and not just replicating exactly what might have been useful at AIM. I know that it might not be exactly useful here, at Aylwood. And so really trying to, at the moment, I'm like in the phase of the pre implementation. So feeling out what the culture is at the school, feeling out what teachers are really comfortable with at the moment and what they might not be so comfortable with before I then start thinking about what coaching is going to look like in that domain. But yeah, my personal take on coaching is that
Yeah.
it's that athlete feeling. It's literally just making teaching a sport, teaching a real craft, and being able to have someone come in there and say to me, just this specific moment, that moment where you did the call and response, what was the cue? So what was the response that students gave you? How could you change the cue slightly to get a better response? And I just loved that granular look at my practice over and over
Mm.
and over again, every single week, because it does really make you better. And teachers are creatures of habit. And so actually, if you coach me every single week, I'm eventually going to change my habits to be stronger ones, to be more effective ones, and overall become a stronger teacher. So yeah, I'm very big on coaching, and like I said, because I'm such a sport geek as well, I really see the value of having a coach and having those external eyes looking at what you're doing and giving you feedback on that.
Make teaching a sport is a great like tagline for a podcast, I reckon. That's awesome. So like you got this idea of granularity.
Mhm.
That's like one of the things that really underpins what you believe about coaching, right? It's got to
Mhm.
be granular for that very reason, that like that's how you develop performance in any domain. Like it's got to be developed one very granular piece at a time.
Mhm.
What are the other kind of really key ingredients that you think make high quality coaching? The kind of ingredients that you think actually these principles should be
Have to be
present
there.
in kind
Yeah.
of any in any context, and then they're
Yeah.
adapted to the context. So what are those principles?
Again, so I would say within the coaching aspect of it, it has got to be granular. Well, we've already said that, but it's also got to be actionable. And that actionable part means that it's got to be something that I can go into my classroom tomorrow and immediately start working on, right? So it's got to be very, very applicable. And I think from chats that I've had with teachers, particularly those who have been in the game a lot longer than I have been, one of the things that they've always said is that feedback has always been quote unquote fluffy and very much like improve the pace of of your lesson. Okay, well, how do I action that? How do I go into my classroom tomorrow and improve the pace of my lesson? And so I think a really key ingredient of coaching is that the actions or the feedback has to be actionable, and then it has to be so actionable that I can stand up right now and rehearse it with you and show you very quickly what that's going to look like in my classroom. And the more realistic we make that rehearsal, the better. So if it's going to be a step that's going to be happening in my classroom, let's go into my classroom and let me show you where I'm going to stand, and let me show you, you know, the student who might not pay attention and how I need to bring him back in, but really think about the context, the real life context of when I'm going to have to deliver this, and let's do it there. And rehearsal, again, lots of teachers often feel uncomfortable with it. Um, but like teaching is a performance. It really is. Like it absolutely is. You know, we stand there and we think about the lines that we're going to use to explain a specific concept, and we think about how we're going to check for that learning, and it almost happens in your head before it happens in real life. And so actually the rehearsal is that middle step of it's happened in my head. I can see what you're saying in terms of what I need to
Mm.
do, and then before I actually have to go and perform this in front of an audience that is quite challenging at times for us, let me rehearse it in a safe space right now with you as my coach, me in my element, in my environment where I'm going to have to do this, before I then have to go and do this in front of a class of maybe 30 kids, for some of us. Yeah. So I think rehearsal is a really key aspect there. But rehearsal can only happen if the action is very actionable, and not broad and vague.
Actionable, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Can can we just like just to jump to Chris for a second, right?
Mhm.
So this idea of rehearsal, so that would be something that Chris, with your performance background, and obviously your school is a music specialist school as well.
Yeah.
Like the word rehearsal will obviously be really familiar to you. What is the difference between teacher rehearsal, so rehearsal within coaching, and the kind of rehearsal that musicians do?
There is no difference. The difference is that musicians realise they're performing. And as Frida's just said, it's that
Thanks.
conscious
That's it.
click to go, I am performing. And teachers who go, oh no, I'll just get up and start talking. No, you don't. You go, I'm going to leave my problems at the door. I now need to, I've got these 15 kids on, they're at this level, and I've got 2 kids over here, and Johnny's nan's just died, and that kid needs a coloured overlay, even though I know coloured overlays don't work, but I've still got to give him one because he likes, you're thinking, we know that the classroom is myriad complex environment. We've got all these lenses we're looking through, and so we go, well, we're not performing. Musicians, we take a section, we go, practice has to be deliberate and slow. So Keith Slade, who is a conductor, an orchestral conductor, he actually wrote a little bit for our upcoming book, The Succeeding as a Deputy Head book, and he was talking about this exact thing, talking about the preparation of musicians, and that rehearsal has to be slow and deliberate to begin with. You take one bar and you practice that bit, and you take it slowly. You get the notes right, you get the space between the notes correct, and then you speed it up a little bit. Have you got that bit right? Excellent. Now we're going to move on. No musician is going to have a go at that. Now, if a musician is way more advanced than that, guess what? That's what they do. They go back and they play it that slowly. One of the greatest myths that you discover as a musician is that the more professional you get, the more you have to practice, which is totally kind of cognitively jarring, because you're like, well, yeah, but if I'm say you're a classical violinist and you get paid to be a violinist and you get paid to stand in front of an orchestra and you're soloist and you've got albums, you're rehearsing 6 or 7 hours a day. Now,
Wow.
most people think that, well, they're good enough, they don't need to rehearse, they're just going to pick it up and go. No, the better you get, the more rehearsal you need. It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, but for musicians. Like, the better you think you are, the less you'll rehearse, and you won't actually be very good at all. So you'll be like sitting on the toilet playing your violin, watching YouTube videos, thinking you know everything. Whereas you, like with the Dunning-Kruger effect, the more you realise that you are becoming advanced, the more you realise you've got to practice. And the more you
Exactly.
realise you've got to get granular, and you've got to get deliberate, and you've got to get intentional. And the only difference between musicians and teachers is that musicians know they're performing.
And to what extent then, Frida, so like thinking about your role now,
Yeah.
like driving coaching forward, having been in the profession for 7 years yourself, and you've got new teachers at a new school that you don't necessarily know, and they're way more experienced than you. This idea that Chris has just been talking about the more experienced you become, the more expert you become, the more you've got to rehearse, the more you've got to practice. How applicable and how helpful is that for someone going into lead coaching in a school where you've got teachers that are experienced?
Really good question again. I would say there's a clip that I've seen, and I'm really rubbish with names, so I'm really sorry, but there's um there's a clip that I've seen, and it's always musicians, where a man was coaching, I think she was a violinist actually, and was showing her one particular piece or area of the music that he wanted her to practice. And there was a moment where the musician isn't getting it, and so he models that exact bit for her to see, to listen to, so that she could see what she was aiming for. And I think the biggest challenge that I'm having or that I'm going to have going into this year, is that some of the teachers have, and this is amazing, but some of the teachers have been teaching at this specific school for the last 18, 19, 20 years, some of them. And so their mental model is very much built up on what they've seen at this specific school over the years. And whilst that means that they have an amazing understanding of the students, an amazing, relationship with lots of the families, which is a really key part of supporting students through education, I do think one of the areas where they maybe have not been so fortunate is that they've not had mental models of what success can look like in the classroom, you know, in terms of variety. And so a big part of what I'm going to be working on is really showing models, whether that those are videos or even sending some of these teachers to other schools to go and look at how they do, um, you know, checking for understanding or AFL, or how they do the plenary bit, or how they do the entry routines, but specific areas, so that they have that exposure that I've been really fortunate to have, and then being able to then bring that back into the classroom. I also think it's really key to highlight the difference between knowing and doing. And I think, especially as teachers, we know a lot, and we almost trick ourselves into believing that because we know that we're doing it, and that's just not true, right? We know that we should be asking questions to check that students have understood our instructions. But actually, lots of teachers will notice, if they ever record themselves back, that, oh, actually, I don't do it as frequently as I should be doing it, right? And so I think that's going to be a really big piece of yes, we know it, and yes, we've gone over this, and we've probably have had PD looking at these different areas for years on years on years, and it feels like really repetitive. But actually, now the big difference is we need to start doing it, and we need to get it done. And I think a big way to drive that is through drop-ins and through collective drop-ins, which is again a big shift in culture. I think for me, I've come from a school where everybody does drop-ins, and it isn't just SLT that does drop-ins, and it isn't just the teaching and learning lead that does drop-ins. Every single teacher at every single level goes in to see someone else, and gives them a shout out, but also gives them an action step. Um, and so I think shifting that along, so that people are leaving their classrooms a bit more, and being able to hold each other to account, to say, remember on Monday, we looked at questioning. I came into your classroom, and in this moment, that would have been a perfect time to do the questioning, like right there, or to use that specific strategy right there, and helping each other to do more of the doing. Because the knowing, lots of teachers will be able to narrate to you exactly what a good lesson should look like. But whether it's actually happening in the classroom or not, it isn't. It isn't always
I
happening.
think what you get to there as well, I think there's a middle bit between knowing and doing, and we talk about
Mm,
this in the book with Sarah and Hailey, is like it's this deciding bit. Because I
yes.
think we're pretty good at like knowing what to do. Like we all
Yeah.
know, like you say, we all know that cold calling is good because you're going to be
Mhm.
driving attention and thinking, right?
Mhm.
And we can all do cold calling,
Mhm.
and maybe we've done some whole group rehearsal. We can do it, but do we decide to do it at the right
Right.
time for the right reason? I think
Right.
that's often the missing bit. But I
Mhm.
think just like connecting up those pieces a little bit between what the two of you have just said there, this idea about like more experienced teachers and actually do more experienced teachers need coaching, like can they benefit from coaching, can they get anything out of coaching? I'm a big believer in the fact that they can, and they need coaching as much as everybody else does, simply because as Chris said, you get to the point where to get better, because you're so good that actually to get better becomes really hard.
I
And
agree.
how when you're that good and everything's happening automatically, which we know it does for experts, right? We know that experts aren't making decisions in the moment by like thinking, oh, I could do this and I could do this, but I think I'll do that. They're just being cued by things subconsciously in the
Mhm.
environment. It's just that they're being cued by the right stuff, and so
Mhm.
therefore they end up making the right decisions at the right time for the right reasons. So if you're doing all of that automatically, and that is a part of expertise, it follows that you're not going to be aware of the decisions
That
that
you're
you're
doing it.
making,
Yeah.
and therefore you need a coach to surface your awareness of
Mhm.
those decisions, for you to then be able to tweak those decisions and make really tiny little incremental changes to them. It's almost like expecting an expert teacher to keep improving on their own is almost quite unfair, because by the fact that they are expert, they're doing something that makes it harder to improve, which is ultimately like doing a lot of what they do automatically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that was a really interesting point to try and pick up on, that like Chris, within a music context, say, well, of course, the most talented, the most expert, they need a coach to get better, because it's those tiny, fine little improvements. And Frida, you
Mhm.
said earlier about sports people, at the very elite level, they've all got coaches. Why? Because how can Novak Djokovic possibly be acutely aware of the tiny little granular changes that he could make to his near perfect game to get that little bit better? You can't. You need another pair of eyes. You need that wider lens of awareness to work with you to kind of guide you to make that next improvement. So I just think that you know, when I know it's an important feature of the and an important characteristic of the context that you're now going to work in, where
Yeah.
you've got more experienced teachers than perhaps you've had before to develop.
Mhm.
I think it's just a really, really fascinating point around how we frame coaching for more experienced
Yeah.
and more expert teachers.
I do think that,
1,000%.
even when you think about the expert orchestral players, they have lessons. They still have lessons.
Right.
That goes beyond coaching. It's like, I need to get better at this bit, or I need help here. And then there's something odd that happens in music, whereby the conductor, who is then conducting the orchestra, is likely to be an expert in one of the instruments and then have
Mhm.
kind of rough knowledge of all the others. So, for instance, going back to Keith, he's ex-professional clarinet player, so he can talk to the woodwinds and be like, "Oh, you need to use the fingering in this way, and I think you need to tongue the note in this way, and it needs to be more like this." But because he has general knowledge of everything that's happening, he's able to talk to players that have been playing for as long as he has been alive and go, "Can you just adjust your grip on that? And actually, this is what I want." And so he has to join in the shared language of the orchestra
Mhm.
to get those more experienced players on board with him, to get that buy-in, so that they're like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same for you, I guess, Frida, in the fact that you're coming into a school where people are going to have been teaching potentially for as long as you've been alive.
Yeah.
You know, like, and
Yeah.
literally, who are you to walk up to them? They're going to be, and you can understand, because part of this retention crisis thing, another thing we were talking about at the Festival of Education, is what you are about to do is either going to make that teacher decide, nah, this is my last year. I can't be doing
Mhm.
it with all this stuff.
Mhm.
I was here 30 years ago when they called it something else. I'm
Yeah.
done. It's just
Yeah.
cycles of nonsense.
Yeah.
Or they go, do you know what? This Frida speaking, I get it. She's shown me how this can work, and that's an awful lot of pressure. But it's got to happen, and they're either going to get on or they're going to get off. How do you kind of deal with that pressure, on
I
top of the fact
think,
that you're teaching as well?
yeah, I think one thing that I've really been thinking about is like, why do we even do PD, right? And I think PD, oftentimes we really focus on the teachers, and of course we talk about the teachers because they're the ones who are engaging in the PD, but ultimately it's actually about the students, right? It's actually about how much more we can get our students to learn and how much better we can get them to learn and to have a great classroom experience no matter which classroom they're in. And so ultimately, I think one of the saddest things that's happened over the last few years is that teachers have felt that PD and things like drop-ins and observations has actually been about them as individuals, and so naturally some teachers feel extremely defensive about people being in their classrooms because they don't see it as a supportive measure, and even the word supportive, I think lots of teachers have now taken to quite badly, because you've got schools putting things in place like support plans that are really
Yeah,
just about how we can end up getting rid of this teacher, right? And so all of these different words mean that teachers feel extremely defensive about having someone else in their classroom. And so one of the biggest messages that I want to be able to communicate to the new staff that I'll be working alongside is, none of this is about you. No offense. Okay. Like, it's none of the things that we're going to be talking about, none of the things that we're going to be working on is about you as a person or as a teacher. It is ultimately about how do we get our students to learn better. And so it is highly possible and probable and likely that over the years you have found lots of different mechanisms and techniques that have been useful in getting our students to learn. But so much research shows that students learn better in terms of cognitive load when there are certain areas that they don't have to think about. In other words, routines, right? If the routines are similar from classroom to classroom, or exactly the same from classroom to classroom, it means that students have to worry less about how to respond or how to behave themselves in a classroom and more on the actual learning. And so, one of the key messages that I want to really drive at my new school is, I am not teaching you how to be a good teacher because you've done it for so many years. You probably are a great teacher already. Actually, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get all of us on the same page so that our students can be great students. Because if they just know how Miss Arthur is going to issue that warning is exactly the same way that Mr. Colbeck is going to issue that warning, then ultimately they go into that classroom feeling safe, feeling like everything is fair, and feeling like they can just concentrate on
Mhm.
the lesson that they need to complete. And so I really think a key strategy is to remove this pressure that has been placed on things like drop-ins and observations and quote unquote support plans, and really driving home that ultimately the only thing I'm going in there to look at is your student. That is all I'm going in there to look at. Um, and even with drop-ins, right, I'm looking at the student's book, I'm looking at the student's response to that countdown that you did the student have their eyes on you, and did they stop talking when you finished that countdown? They didn't. Great. How do we make them do the right thing? And really focusing on student response and student experience, and removing that pressure, I think, that has been placed on lots of teachers when it comes to things like drop-ins, observations, and PD.
I think that's so essential and such a fascinating and brilliant way of putting it, that you're putting everything child centered. All schools say, "Oh, we're child centered. We do everything for the child,"
Mm,
and yet what we risk doing, and I really want to be clear about this, is that when I'm talking about these experienced teachers who have been teaching for as long as they have,
yeah.
that's the experience we want. We want it to stay in our
Exactly.
classrooms. It's
Exactly.
we don't want it. We don't want them to get off the bus and leave our school, please, because you're not getting on my
Yeah.
program. It's like,
Yeah.
I am here to literally unlock everything and make sure that our kids are getting your experience, because we want you, we need you.
Exactly.
It's another thing we were talking about at the festival, where we are hemorrhaging experience as a profession, and
Mhm.
we need people like you to, and I hope people who listen to this podcast, to be able to go, that's a fascinating twist, and to go to that difficult person, the say difficult person, the difficult situation, the person
Yeah.
who is becoming defensive. So
Yes.
the person who that you described, who actually, maybe I didn't misspeak, maybe they're sat listening to this podcast going, yeah, I've got a difficult person. And actually, no, do you
Right.
know what? You haven't got a difficult person. You've got an experienced teacher who feels undervalued, overwhelmed. The whole sector is feeling like that, with changes
Yeah.
to um, you only have to have been on Facebook and head teacher chat in the past couple of days to see dozens of head teachers pulling their hair out because they've not been able to get on to do their PE funding, and DFE's just gone, oh, it's not worked, or maybe try it in September, but now you've missed out on it. And they brought out guidance today,
Yeah.
like the day after most people have broken up. So they're all under all of this pressure,
Mhm.
and they're not the difficult person. They are the person to be sat down, to be encouraged, to have these processes co-created with. You have been here for this many years. Talk to me about the culture in this school. Talk to me about your previous
Exactly.
experience. Who was
Yeah.
my predecessor? What did they do wrong?
Yeah.
What do I need to do?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going anywhere. As you know, with that attitude, I'm not going anywhere. This is the job, and without, as you said, no offense, it's not about you. It's about the kids.
Yeah.
So I
It
think
is
what
about
you've
the
what
kids.
you've said is gold, and knocks down a door that has, in my head, I've kind of gone, that makes so much sense.
Mm.
Coming at it from the point of view of unlocking your potential, which, if you have been here for that many years, will definitely be on the back burner, because you know exactly what to do to get by.
Yeah.
Because if you know what to do to get by, why would you try harder? The job's
Right.
hard enough as it is.
Right.
What
Right.
we've got to get them to the place of is that their 90% is as good as 100%. On a bad day,
Exactly.
that their 70% is as good,
Is as
and that
good
the
as.
children are
Yeah.
the ones that don't suffer.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the same way that as a teacher, and I've been leading on year 11 outcomes the last 3 years at my old school. And one thing that I absolutely hate, I hate it when teachers do this, right? Is give a student a grade 9 in their first set of mocks. I'm like, why have you done that? Because now you've made this child believe that there's absolutely nothing else that they need to do between now and July, that they're completely perfect, right? And so I always, even when a kid's absolutely smashed it, I never give full marks. I just never, ever, ever do it, because there's always something for you to work on. And so as a teacher, if that is my mindset, if I really believe that my students always have something to work on, even when they've nailed the 90-word French essay, and I'm still giving them more different ones to practice, why would I not apply that same approach to myself as a professional? Why would I not say, until I get 100% grade nines in my classrooms, I have to be confronted with the fact that I am not 100% effective? And I know that some people don't feel, great about using outcomes as a reflection of their classroom practice. And I hear that because it isn't quite black and white. But I definitely think that it's a good way to drive motivation. And so for me, I am absolutely always looking at my year 11 outcomes and thinking, well, I didn't get 100% 9 plus, or I didn't get 100% 4 plus even. What is it that I am doing wrong, and how many more grade 3 students can I get across the 4 plus line next year, and how am I going to do it? But really being like excellent focus and excellent driven is, I think, a key part of any teacher wanting to just become the best teacher that they can possibly be, because it does change lives. Everything that we do, especially if you're a teacher in the sort of community that I serve, every single lesson, every single grade that student gets can really be literally life changing. And it was for me. And I can definitely say that the teachers who put in so much time and energy and effort into closing those learning gaps for me, in the end, it's gotten me to a place where I'm very happy in my life, and I'm very happy with what I can do. And I do feel like there's lots of options open to me. And that is completely down to the fact that I had incredible teachers who invested lots of time and energy into making sure that I was going to be here. And so for me, education is really personal. And for me, being a teacher is very, very personal, because it is a personal, life-changing career that we're in. And so we have got to put in all of our energy and focus into making sure that this part of our life is as excellent as it can be.
That is a nice thing to wrap up on. I think that's probably the best ever wrap up anyone's ever done on a podcast.
I was just about to. I took in a deep breath. I was about to be like, "Well, that's that then, Frida." That it's been amazing to talk to you. I don't even have to ask Adam. We are definitely going to ask you to come back on for a future episode, because
Please do.
everything you said then was just absolute gold. Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
No problem.
If anyone wants
you.
to check you out, are you on different socials? Are you on LinkedIn? People can look you up on.
Yes, I'm predominantly on LinkedIn. It's become my favorite social media, weirdly. But yes, I'm on there, Frida Arthur Boakye, and yeah, I would love to connect with as many different people as possible. If you are someone who's leading on teaching and learning, in a similar context to what I'm going into, or if you've managed to get onto the other side, I would love to hear from you and to pick your brain a bit about different ways to get that set up. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, Chris and Adam.
Which is well, it's a sentiment, which
Pleasure.
is exactly why we've got you on, because you're just open to collaboration with everybody, because everybody says, "Oh, you never stop learning," but it feels like you actually live that. So thank you so much for being such an awesome guest, and thank you to everyone listening in your cars or on the bus or on a plane if you're already on your summer holidays. We really hope you have a great summer, and we will see you in September. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for tuning in to the latest episode of the EduPulse podcast. Why not help broaden the conversation and join us over on social media at EduPulseCo, or sign up to our newsletter at edupulse.co, and we'll see you next time.